So I've just realised I have called this video Tory Rebels and the Rwanda Bill Amendments, which makes it sound like some sort of bizarre Harry Potter novel. You're a Tory rebel now, Harry. What? But oh well, that's how they go sometimes when you name these things and you don't realise. But oh well. Now we have said before that next week will be when the Rwanda bill enters the committee stage. And remember, the justification, the reason that the Tory rebels backed down late last year was that Sunak was giving them permission to be able to make this bill stronger. That rather than kill the bill now, they were going to try and make this bill stronger. They were going to put in their amendments, which they were like, yes, this will be the perfect bill. And of course, you got some people did vote for it. There were some votes against, of course, but there were a lot of abstentions. And now comes the truly interesting part, because this week, we are going to see the Rwanda bill enter the committee stage. And let me tell you a prelude to what is going to happen. The Tory rebels and the hard right, aka the five families, are going to make some really ridiculous, like, hard right change to this bill. And then the One Nation Tories are going to come in and undo it. And there is just going to be this back and forth game of ping pong in these committees. And one side is going to get annoyed at the other, and we'll see what survives. But needless to say, this bill is going to come out an absolute mess. And then when it comes to its second reading, will this be voted on? Will either A, the One Nation Tories rebel and say this does not meet our obligation with international standards, we should not pass this bill? Will the Tory rebels decide we ain't going to pass this bill is not hard right enough? And then, of course, if the bill does pass, will it then pass in the Lords? I highly doubt it, given how there has been much resistance to this Rwanda bill from the Lords initially. But here is just a small snapshot of just some of the amendments that the Tory rebels are going to be trying to put in this week. So these are the things you got to watch out for. And of course, how will the One Nation Tories react to these amendments? Will they try and remove them? What will they do? What will their response be? Like I say, gonna be an interesting week. Lots of blue on blue going to happen. So before we do go getting into the rest of this video, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one official link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is, of course, the Pony Club down below as well. And there is the YouTube thank you button as well. So let's crack on into this. So this comes from the Eye with the title of All Changes that the Tory Rebels Want to Make to Rishi Sunak's Rwanda Bill. So the first one is, of course, the really important one, upholding international law. This has been the single big thing that the One Nation Tory group has said, that we should not contravene international law. If we do break this, it's going to make us look very, very bad on the world stage. So what's going on with here? So, former Justice Secretary Robert Buckland has tabled a series of amendments aimed at limiting the ability of the government to try and contravene international human rights law. Okay. The three amendment removes clauses from the bill which declare Rwanda a, quote, safe country, disapply the Human Rights Act, and force the UK courts to disregard the interim rulings by international courts. Most moderate Tories, like Mr. Buckland, supported the bill at its first reading last month, but have warned that their backing would be withdrawn if the safety of the Rwanda bill begins to undermine the UK's human rights obligations. So, and of course, What are the Tories going to do? What are these right-wing Tories going to do? They're going to try and remove these things. And ultimately, the moderate Tories are then going to withdraw their support from the bill. Meaning that if that happens this week, at its second reading, the moderate Tories are going to vote against it. It ain't going to pass. And these challenges are also going to be in direct opposition to attempts by the right wing of the party, who have tabled another series of sweeping amendments aimed at trying to toughen up the bill and strengthen the powers of the UK government to ignore international law. And this is the big key point. We cannot, and the UK should not, ignore international law. The UK doing that is, well, uh, yeah. We constantly talk, especially sort of the UK's position internationally, is that international law should be respected. This has been a long-standing UK governmental position, and now we've got people going, no, we're just going to ignore international law. And yet, we have constantly, over the past couple of years, condemned Putin for breaking international law. We've condemned the Houthis for breaking international law. We have condemned Israel, for breaking international law and what it has done in regards to Gaza. We cannot then just turn around and go, we're just going to ignore international law, because it makes us look like an absolute basket case. So, it is expected that even if the amendments supported by the centrist One Nation caucus are not supported in the Commons, similar challenges could be put forward when the bill reaches the House of Lords. And again, if it won't pass in the Lords, well, it ain't going to pass. The One Nation caucus of Conservatives have said that over 100 MPs amongst its number and in the Commons, but there are many ministers who are very unlikely to support a rebellion. We'll see what happens. But that's what the One Nation Tories are going to do. Removing calling Rwanda a safe country when it is clearly not a safe country, given the fact that itself might be going to war very shortly with the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's still massive international safety concerns about what happens when we do send asylum seekers there. Rwanda does not have the best human rights record when it comes to that. So the other one we're going to be watching out for as well next week, the notwithstanding clause. So what on earth is this? So one of the key amendments to the bill being put by veteran Tory MP Bill Cash calls for the government to add a notwithstanding clause, which stipulates both domestic and international law cannot be used to prevent or delay the removal to Rwanda of any individual. Wow. So guess what? You're going to Rwanda. You can't do anything about it internationally. You can't even do anything domestically against it. That immediately, if something like that happens, that immediately can be contested in a court of law as being unconstitutional, because you have a right, both international law and domestically, to be able to challenge that. So that right there, unconstitutional, going to be immediately challenged in the courts should this pass. It ain't going to work. But, again, these right-wingers are complete fantasists about this. So, it also lists the Immigration Act, the Human Rights Act, which are two pieces of legislation that should be disapplied, as well as any EU-derived laws or decisions by the European Court of Human Rights. The amendment has also been backed by 34 other right-wing MPs, including former Immigration Minister Robert Jerrick and former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. The heads of the so-called five families are named amongst these other backers, including the New Conservatives leaders Danny Kruger, Miriam Cates, the Northern Research Group chair by Jake Berry, the European Research Group Mark Francois, and the Common Sense Group led by John Hayes, and of course the leading Conservative Growth Group figure, Sir Simon Clarke. Former Conservative Party leader Ian Duncan Smith and ex-cabinet minister Jacob Rees-Mogg are also listed as signatories. That does not fly. As we said, this just gets instantly challenged. Instantly challenged in the court. Disapplied. You cannot allow that. The entire Rwanda bill basically just goes up in flames. The idea, in a sense, that you can just do that. No, you can't just say no. This bill's not going to allow. We're just going to just ignore this. And remember, you've got that First Amendment right at the beginning, which has clearly said just imagine for a second if all these right-wing claims get through, but also that one nation Tory group idea that gets said at the top that, we can't ignore international human rights law, and our own domestic, and you can't disallow the Human Rights Act. This is why I've said this bill could be an absolute mess if this somehow gets out of committee. So the next one, the blocking of suspensive claims. Mr. Jerrick, who resigned as immigration minister last month over his opposition to the safety of the Rwanda bill, has tabled 4 amendments, all collectively aimed at blocking suspensive claims. When a person appeals their removal because they believe it is unsafe for them to be sent to Rwanda or another safe country. The explanatory notes for these amendments do state that the aim is to remove the ability of individuals to block their removal through the series of suspensive claims, except in rare situations. Given the examples of these situations where a removal could be blocked include where there is a bad faith or on the part of decision makers, or including deemed medically unfit to travel. Mr. Braverman, along with other 33 backers of these amendments, as well as heads of the New Conservative Northern Research Group and the Conservative Growth Group. The next one, disapplying the Human Rights Act. This ain't gonna fly either. I tell you now. 8 also further amendments led by Mr. Jerrick also focus on ensuring that Human Rights Act, which enshrines European Court of Human Rights into UK law, does not apply to the safety of the Rwanda bill. And I love this. It's just this idea of this absolute nonsense idea that you can just put into this. We can just disallow this entire rules and sections. Yeah, we can just ignore that. This is just yeah, next week's going to be fun. So, the explanatory notes for each amendment state that they are intended to try and ensure that the relevant provisions of the Human Rights Act of 1998 are fully disapplied for both the bill and for the Legal Migration Act of 2023 in relation to removals. The amendments directly refer to sections 4 and 10 of the Human Rights Act, which allows for domestic courts to declare UK law as incompatible with human rights and give them the power to require Parliament to reconsider. Again, good luck getting that amendment through. And even then, good luck getting this bill voted on, because I tell you now what would probably happen. If there isn't going to be a rebellion and the moderate Tories aren't going to vote no, what's their other option? We'll just abstain. That is very likely what you could see these moderate Tories do. We aren't going to vote for the bill, but we're not going to vote against it because we don't want to be seen as rebels. We know maybe this might bring down the government. Who knows what reason they might give. But you might see a lot of abstentions, which might see a very small number of votes for the bill, but enough in the opposition to be able to vote no and kill this bill. like I say, who knows what might happen? All depends on how many of these ludicrous rules get through. And remember, that first bill at the top being put forward by the moderate Tories is explicitly saying we cannot ignore international law and we cannot disallow rulings from the European Court of Human Rights and ignore that laws as well. How on earth, if that gets through and the rest of these amendments get through, just this bill is destined to be an absolute mess. Absolute mess. But anyway, and of course, the final one they want to do is preventing Rule 39 injunctions. So, 2 amendments also tabled by Mr. Jerrick aimed to add a clause to the safety of the Rwanda bill, stating that injunctions from the European Court of Human Rights are not considered binding by the government. These rulings, known as Rule 39 injunctions, are interim measures that can be issued by the court when there is an immediate risk or irreparable damage to an asylum seeker facing deportation, either through threat of life, ill treatment, or torture upon the return. The note accompanying these statements add that it is trying to ensure that the default position is that Rule 39 injunctions are not treated as binding on the United Kingdom and will not prevent removals to Rwanda. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. This is going to be, we're going to see a lot of arguments next week about those different amendments. What gets in, what doesn't get in. But I'll tell you what, that first one, if the moderate Tories get through, bear in mind there's more backers. If it's true, they've got over 100 backers, while these other ones just have like 34. Then the moderate Tories are either going to go, our amendment passes, which immediately disallows every single other of those amendments, because that amendment would contradict every single other amendment, saying, well, actually, we want to ignore, the rulings of international courts, the European Court of Human Rights. We want to disallow Human Rights Act. We want to stop all those. But you've got another amendment in the bill that says, no, actually, we should respect international law. We should respect the European Court of Human Rights. This bill is going to be an absolute mess. And either A, it ends up just in, committee ping pong, just bouncing back and forth between each other and never leaves committee, which it might do, because I do not see how these amendments are compatible with each other. And then if it does go through and the moderate Tory bill doesn't pass, I don't see it passing potentially in the House of Commons. I do not see it passing in the House of Lords, because the Lords are immediately going to challenge every single one of those amendments that the 5 families and the right-wing Tories are putting forward. And then you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg coming out and saying, well, if Rishi Sunak passes this law, this Rwanda bill, and this doesn't lower, asylum rates, is going to be deemed as a failure, and it's going to look completely foolish. And as we have said time and time again, doesn't matter that the Tories pass this Rwanda bill, it's not going to reduce the amount of people coming and immigrating to this country. That is a fantasy that the right-wing Tories have concocted in their imaginations of, you don't understand, if we are seen as being like really hard on immigration, people aren't going to come and immigrate here. Again, absolute fantasy that they have concocted in their mind. Remember, the Rwanda bill explicitly says we can only send about 200 people. That's it. Just this bill is going to be an absolute mess, and it is only going to be an even bigger mess. And you are now going to see Tories fighting it out this week about these amendments and which amendments get in this bill for the next reading. And then, will this bill then pass? Will the five families go, we ain't going to pass this bill? It's not hard enough. Honestly, yeah, next week's going to be fun. Next week's going to be very, very fun. I can tell you that now. So, as always, thank you very much, of course, for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.